What is up, guys, and welcome back to another video. So in competitive Fortnite, a lot of players tend to have issues with endgame, whether it's not knowing how to tunnel properly, when to go for kills, or how to close out the game and clear out the last few players. There are tons of issues that you might run into which could stop you from winning endgame in scrims, arena, and tournaments. So in this video, we're going to be going over everything that you need to know to start dominating endgame in Fortnite. Also, I want to mention that this guide is valid for all game modes, so whether you're trying to improve in solos, duos, trios, or even squads, this guide should help you out a bunch. With that said, if you go on to enjoy this video, be sure to drop a like on it, and if you're new around here, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more tips and tricks content just like this. With that said though, and without further ado, let's get into it. So the first section of this video is going to be all about handling rotations. We'll be talking about zone mechanics, some meta-proof strategies for late game, as well as some general tips that you need to know when it comes to, well, not dying. Starting off with zones, in my personal opinion, late game properly starts around the 4th zone. That's where most players have established loadouts, have farmed up throughout the game, and most mid-game fights have been completed. We could argue all day about whether 3rd, 4th, 5th, or 6th zone is the start of endgame, but I'm going to be going with 4th. So when it comes to 4th zone, this is going to be the last quote-unquote normal zone of the match. The 4th zone is going to spawn fully within the 3rd zone, and from there, the 5th zone will take place. The 5th zone, also known as the 50-50 zone or half in, half out, is basically the zone that's halfway within the zone and halfway outside. And from there, the 6th through 9th zones, aka the moving zones, are all, well, moving zones that basically go far outside of the current zone. They force everyone to rotate and essentially make the lobby clear out quickly. And as you probably know, if the 9th zone is actually reached, then it's basically just going to collapse into nothing but storm, resulting in a heal off. So with that said, I just wanted to go over each of the endgame zones to get anybody up to speed who might not be completely knowledgeable about them just yet. Moving on from that, the biggest key to rotations is definitely going to be mobility. Obviously, mobility kind of does depend on the meta. Between launch pads, shockwaves, impulses, crash pads, grapplers, there are simply so many mobility items that almost go through a rotation in Fortnite, but it's really critical to have some sort of mobility to rely on. It is true that in the 5th zone and beyond, you're going to find a lot of players launch padding in the current meta, but if you have nothing for yourself and nobody else happens to launch, then you're going to be in a really bad spot. So in endgame, it's definitely a good idea to look around and see if someone's about to launch pad or use mobility, but it is critical that you carry at least some mobility, that way you can stay on top of things, and anyone else using mobility that you can borrow is really just a bonus. Another thing that's critical when it comes to rotations is simply getting ahead. Getting ahead of the zone, aka rotating early, allows you to put yourself in a nice position and look back for impact frags, which we'll be discussing in a bit. As well as that, it really just creates a safety net for you. That way you're not stuck rotating last second and dying in the process. I'll tell you guys that the most common reason that amateur players die in endgame is by rotating too late and getting stuck. Now, at times it won't be possible to rotate early, such as if you're super low on materials or you don't have mobility on you for some reason, but for the most part, you're going to want to try and get into the zone at least reasonably early. That doesn't mean to launch the second the zone pops up either, but rather to wait for an opportunity when people aren't looking at you and start making your rotation. As well as that, on your rotations, you're going to want to emphasize saving materials as well, as this is one of the biggest killers in endgame. Whether it's by using a low material tarp like a triangle tarp, or holding a lot of mobility, or simply going for kills often enough to refresh your materials, you're going to want to develop some form of material strategy before it's too late, that way you don't get pushed onto low ground with 0 materials and end up dead. So now that we've gone over the rotational aspects of endgame, I want to discuss the topic of layering and explain how you can manage layers in your endgames. There are usually going to be 3 layers in endgame: low ground, mid ground, and high ground. Starting off with mid ground, this is where the majority of players are going to be, and obviously this is just, well, the middle. Players on mid ground tend to be in a decent spot with some materials and typically some HP as well. There will be some fighting, especially between people who have low materials, but it won't be the heaviest area for fights. Mid ground is really the place that you're going to be at if you have some materials, HP, and a reasonable loadout, and you're kind of just in a normal situation. On the other hand, low ground is going to be the place you go if you're desperately looking for kills. Low ground in endgame is basically the last resort, the place that you go if you simply can't stay on mid ground. The players on low ground are typically going to have little to no materials and probably low HP as well, and really low ground is just the place you go to hopefully get some kills and get back into the game. This is very far from optimal, but if you're confident in your ability to out-aim your opponents and work around different builds, then you should be fine. Just be aware that some mid ground players will look down as well, since low ground does tend to be the area where people with low HP go, making for easy kills. That's just one more reason to spend as little time as possible on low ground in endgame. And finally guys, the last layer in endgame is going to be high ground. Now obviously high ground is a nice place to be. As we discussed earlier, your goal is to basically look down and pressure people, especially those trying to take your height, and then simply maintain your high ground for the duration of the match. Some people might make psycho plays or try to take it from you, but if you can keep your cool and you have reasonable fighting mechanics, high ground will generally be the best place to be in endgame, and it's the ultimate goal to finish up the game and grab the win. Moving on to the next little topic though, and we've got impact fragging. If you don't know by now, impact fragging basically refers to kills that you get to refresh something, usually materials or shields. There are certain situations you should and shouldn't go for impact frags in, however, and I want to discuss a few of them here. Keep in mind that a lot of this is going to come down to trial and error, but I will be giving some general guidelines here. So when should you go for kills? Well, to put it simply, pretty much any time that you either need the kill or you can go for it safely. Typically, if you're in the zone or very close to it, not being targeted by other players, and you expect to clean up the kill quickly, that's a prime opportunity. You can also go for kills if you need a refresh, of course, but try to avoid putting yourself in a situation where you're targeted by a ton of people or fighting anywhere you have a high chance of being third-partied. Impact frags are really reserved for those times where you have a reason to go for a kill, you're low on materials or heals, you have an easy opportunity for a kill, or you're being forced into a fight. If you're super desperate and you need an impact frag instantly to have any chance at surviving, then try to find a player to jump on and catch off guard. The quicker that you can mitigate these types of situations, the better, and in endgame, since everyone is so caught up trying to survive, oftentimes it's super easy to use the element of surprise and get a very easy kill doing so. And finally guys, the final stage of the game is going to be when you take height. You can technically win from low ground for sure, but generally high ground tends to be the most advantageous position in the final zones. Usually you're going to want to wait for high ground to be in shambles, preferably during the moving zones. 6th zone does tend to be the best time to take height, but 7th can also work depending on your situation. To take height, you can do multiple things. You can use mobility to jump on the high ground player, you can apply pressure and get them to drop and then start building up, or you can simply crank up and force them into a build fight for height, but that last method does tend to be the most risky. Holding height after you get it really just comes down to awareness and stopping anyone else's attempts to take height. If you can hold height, continue spraying down for kills on players who are weak, and stop any attempts to take height from you, you should be all set to win the game. Just keep in mind that you will have to keep checking your materials and make sure that you don't run out as well. If you're stuck on low ground trying to win the game, I recommend getting it down to a 1v1 by fighting off everyone else on low ground and simply fighting it out with what you have. At a certain point, your opponent is probably going to jump down or at least give you an opportunity to go up and finish up the final 1v1. But with all that said guys, that's going to wrap it up for this video on how to dominate endgame in Fortnite. If this video helped you out, be sure to drop a like on it and let me know what you guys thought of it down in the comments. As well as that, if you'd like to help me out a bit extra, then consider using code Teckoh in the Fortnite item shop, as it's 100% free and it really does help a bunch. And finally guys, if you do have any other video ideas that you want to see on the channel, then let me know down in the comments. I'm constantly on the lookout for video ideas, and if you do have a solid idea, there's a good chance that I might make a video on it. With that said though, thank you all for watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.